Hey, let's try this again. My internet cut out, so we're starting over again. We'll pretend like you just got here and I just got here. I'm Kim Kautzer. I am the creator and founder of WriteShop, and I'm excited to be able to share WriteShop Junior with you today, just as if we were at a convention in a booth and I could explain our curriculum to you. So instead, you get my family room and me, not in a booth, but with all my WriteShop Junior curriculum in front of me, and I'm ready to show you how this exciting program works to help you teach your upper elementary children how to write. So we're focusing on grades 3 through 6, and one of the beauties of WriteShop Junior is it's just not your typical writing curriculum. It's not an open and go workbook. It's not a lot of fill in the blanks. It's hands-on, creative, engaging, fun. A lot of activities are done orally. I'm guessing that a lot of you have children who are reluctant writers or children who have some learning struggles. You may also have a really engaged, excited, eager writer, and if you have one of those, this is also going to be perfect for you because WriteShop Junior is for everybody. Grades 3 to 6, any kind of writer. It's multi-sensory, so the activities will be visual, auditory, they will be kinesthetic and tactile. There may be some get up and move kinds of activities for your squirrely kiddos. Something for everyone. WriteShop Junior includes games that teach writing skills. The nice thing about that is the games are done orally, so your kids don't have to expend extra writing energy on stuff that's not going to actually be their composition. They can save their writing energies for that specific activity. So games, graphic organizers to help them with their planning and brainstorming, and also self-editing opportunities for them to learn this important skill of proofreading their own work. So we are going to look at WriteShop Junior. Let me get over here to my notes so that I don't forget anything. First, let's talk about the genres in WriteShop Junior. So WriteShop Junior has a lot of different genres. So in other words, we're going to be teaching the kids not only to write about, a report or, things like that, but they're going to engage with the writing by doing things like fiction stories that might include humor or mystery, adventure, science fiction. I mean, we want to get the kids excited about writing, so we're giving them topics that will really connect with them. And especially if you have boys, they will really like to write something that's going to be right up their alley, an adventure story or science fiction. But then we also have historical fiction in some of the books. We have some poetry, and we will also get into nonfiction, which includes personal narratives, book summaries, and informative writing and reports. We pack all of this into 10 lessons per book, and I'll talk to you about that in just a minute. So in addition to, let me back up. Let's talk first about what is included in WriteShop Junior. Every lesson is broken up into 8 different components, and those components are called activity sets. So we have our workbook, and I'll show you what these all look like. And we have, let me get a teacher's manual here, show you the schedules. So every lesson in your book is broken down into 3 weeks per lesson. So here you can see we've got our schedule, and it's broken down into week 1, week 2, and week 3. The gray days are no writing, which is wonderful because homeschooling. You don't have to do writing every single day. So on Mondays, or whatever you decide is your first day of the week, there's going to be activity set 1. Then you've got activity set 2, and these are always going to be the same. So whether you are working in lesson 1 or lesson 10, if you're on activity set 1 of that lesson, you will be right here. Okay, so there's your schedule. We also have a more speedy schedule if you need to get through the book quickly. Let's say that you are starting mid-year. You can use this schedule and you'll get a lesson done in 2 weeks. If you do this schedule, you'll finish a book in a year. It takes 30 weeks to go through this schedule, and that gives you 6 extra flex weeks for catching up or stretching things out or going on field trips, visiting grandma, whatever you need that extra time for other subjects, you've got it. We're not giving you 36 weeks of lessons 5 days a week. You're getting 30 weeks of lessons 3 days a week. This one is 2 weeks per lesson, so 20 weeks. So it's not quite 2 books in a year, but if you need to, let's say that you end up starting in January and you want to move faster through it, then this would be a good schedule for you to do. But of course, homeschooling means you don't have to finish the book in your calendar year, and especially if you're schooling year-round, you have lots and lots of options. So what do we have? We have 3 different levels. We have Junior D, Junior E, and Junior F. So Book D is your 3rd, 4th grade level and can also be used with children who are reluctant 5th graders. The only reason an older student, a 5th or 6th grader, can't use this book, I shouldn't say can't, would prefer not to use the book, is that some of the illustrations in the student, right in the activity pack, are a little juvenile for your older kids. So let me show you an example, like this one here. So you can see this might look too young for your 11-year-old, even though the lessons themselves would be something that could be age appropriate and tailored to the child. So bear that in mind. When you're placing your kids, you want to put them at the level of their cognitive skills, their thinking skills, not their ability to physically write. You can always scribe for them as they dictate. You can use assistive technology, speech to text, or they can type if physical writing is the issue for them. So don't drop them back to level D. If they're 11, but they're verbal and they can express themselves orally, they just struggle with the pencil, like my son did, it's going to be to their advantage and to yours if you put them in the level that's going to be appropriate for their mental level, their thinking skills. Level E is for your 4th and 5th graders. It can also be used with 6th graders who are not quite ready to move up to level F or who are struggling a little bit. And this is a great level for you to use. It's kind of a good middle of the road level. This Book D is really great. It's a great starting place. It's because it can be used with 3rd and 4th grade. It's really a good middle of the road for if you want to teach several kids together. Book D works great for say 3rd to 5th graders can use this together. As you get younger or older, it's a little bit harder. Like a 3rd grader would be too young for Book E, but you could do a 4th and a 6th grader together in this level. And then Book F is our 5th, 6th grade level. This can also be used with 7th graders who still need a lot of fun in their life. They're not quite mature enough or ready to move on to WriteShop 1, which is our junior high and high school level. And even though WriteShop 1 was written for 12-year-olds and up, it's not overwhelming or intimidating. It doesn't have the fun factor that WriteShop Junior has. And so this is something to consider if you've got a 7th grader who's just not quite ready. And also 8th graders with special needs can often use this level as well. Okay, so we've got our 3 levels. Each level comes with a teacher's manual, which I just showed you. It comes with an activity pack that comes shrink wrapped, and you already got a peek into the activity pack to see that it has 2 sides. So it opens up like a book, but it has a tear-off pad at the top, like a legal pad. So for book D, actually for all the books, you've got one side that has all of their, let me see if I can tip this down, you can see it better. This has all of their worksheets, their pre-writing activities, checklists, brainstorming sheets, okay? And this side has their fold and go grammar, which I will show you in just a bit. So all 3 levels are just like that. They all have the same format. So you've got that, the teacher's manual, the activity pack with your fold and go, and you get a time saver pack. The time saver pack is also shrink wrapped, and these are cardstock. So we call them a time saver pack because they really do save you time. You have cardstock pages that are ready to cut and print. Spinners, all you need to do is poke a brad in here, put a paper clip, a brad through a paper clip, and then you've got a spinner for your game. And this is a pre-writing game. Here's another pre-writing game. It has cards already made, ready to cut. If you have a paper cutter, it makes really short work of these things. Instead of having to create your own, which you can do. If you opt not to get the time saver pack, it will save you some money, but it just depends on what's more important in your life. Do you need to save time or do you need to save money? If you need to save time, you'll want ready to go. All of these come in our pre-made, not pre-assembled, I mean they're packed together, but you get the teacher's guide, the activity pack, the time saver pack. And there's one more element for E and F that is not in Junior D, and that is called a Junior Writer's Notebook. And that looks like this in our store, but it's only digital. All our other products, all the books come physical, print, like I just showed you, but they're also available as ebooks. So you can order them however you want, but the Junior Writer's Notebook comes digitally regardless of how you get it, okay? So we've got in the digital version of this Junior Writer's Notebook, you've got all kinds of ideas on how to use the worksheets, but the worksheets themselves you reproduce and use over and over again. So like this one is an interview, a character interview. So your children can use this to prepare for a writing assignment where they have a story with a character in it. So they can learn more about their character before they actually start writing, and it helps them to have an idea in their mind of what this person or animal is like, what their personality is, what they look like, where they live. And then example of a graphic organizer for it to help your kids plan their story. So these can be used again and again for many different kinds of writing assignments. This is a great the title toolbox. Sometimes kids just can't come up with a title for their stories. This helps them with lots of different ideas for ways that they can come up with a story title. So write a title with your main character's name in it. Write a title you like. Write a title using alliteration where most of the words start with the same letter or sound, like Sam's Spectacular Sunday. Write a title that's just one word. So they can just write a few of these. They don't have to fill in the whole sheet, but then they'll be ready to choose their favorite title for their story. So the Junior Writer's Notebook that comes with level 1, with the WriteShop Junior Book E, is the level 1, and it is called Fun with Story Planning. The one for level 2, which is for Book F, is called Fun with Genre, and each one helps kids explore different genres and write more about them. So as I was telling you, we've got the different activity sets. So on day 1, they do their fold and go grammar. On day 2, you do your pre-writing and your modeling and teaching. On day 3, well, I shouldn't say day 3, because it's wherever you do this in your 3 weeks. Activity set 3 is their skill building activity and their journal writing. Activity set 4 is brainstorming. Activity set 5 is the writing project, which is their rough draft. Activity set 6 is the day they do their self-editing and revising. And activity set 7 is when they publish the project. Now we also have a day 8, and that's the day that you evaluate their work, but there are also some optional activities on that day that tie into the lesson and help them explore other topics like science or history or literature according to the topic of that week's writing. And in addition, there will be a computer caper that teaches them different computer keyboarding skills to help them become more adept at using the computer, which we know is so important in our modern world. So there we have the 8 components of WriteShop Junior. Now I want to start showing you what's inside the book. So first let's talk about fold and go grammar. This happens on the very first day of the 3-week cycle, and the kids will have their tear-off pad. Every 6 pages creates a fold and go. And each fold and go has a different focus. So in book D, they're mostly parts of speech. So you'll have one fold and go folder that's devoted to nouns, one to verbs, one to adjectives, one to prepositions. There will be one about punctuation, one about references. So every book will have different topics for their fold and goes. Here's what one looks like when it's assembled. You staple the pages together, and then you insert them into the folder. So you won't have a stapler that's long enough to staple them to the folder, but if you staple them together, then you can glue the last page down into the folder. Now, each one of these is, so like this one is the verbs fold and go. Every page is a different verb rule. And there's a running story that goes through. So as they go through their fold and go, they follow the story with the fun rules, simple rules, and then there is a little pencil activity that they do at the end. So it's not a lot of fill-in blanks and a lot of work for them to do. So it's not going to qualify as a full-blown grammar curriculum. But it's great for introducing grammar concepts, and it's also wonderful for reviewing ones that they already know. So this is an example of a fold and go from book D, from level 1 fold and go, which you can also buy individually if you are not using the program, WriteShop program, but you just want a grammar supplement. Then you can get the fold and goes individually as well. So that's done on the first day of class. And then the second time that you work, you're beginning your actual pre-writing, where you're starting to learn some new concepts and teach your kids some things about writing that they will need to know for the upcoming lesson. So if the lesson is on science fiction, it may be a game that's related to science fiction. If it's a lesson on science fiction, the pre-writing activity could also be something that teaches them to add detail to the middle of a story, a game that does that. Again, these games are all oral. It's like this one, I'll show you. Oh, there's my, okay, so this game is a riff on, let me step back here, is a riff on Old Maid. So instead of being an Old Maid card, you have a Mad Scientist card right here. And then you have all of these cards. So you've got A cards on this side and B cards on the next page, okay? Now, if you are using the time saver pack, these will be printed on sturdy cardstock, so you just cut them and use them. Otherwise, you need to cut these out and glue them onto index cards or something so that they're sturdy and able to handle, or you can laminate them. And there are instructions in the teacher's guide, but the time saver pack will save you from having to do that. But here's an example of how this would work. You're playing the game, Old Maid, but really Mad Scientist, and one of the cards may say, it may be something about ants. Ants live in tunnels, and Alexandria has an ant farm, and she loves to watch the ants, and they build tunnels, and they get food, and they, they're very entertaining, whatever. It's something factual about ants, because in this lesson they're learning that science fiction teams science fact with fiction. So then the B card, which is the card they have to match when they're playing their Old Maid game, is one day the ants escape, they eat everything in sight, grow to a gigantic size, and try to take over the world. So the fact card about how ants live in colonies and dig tunnels and all that stuff suddenly merges with the fiction. And so you play this game to teach the skill, and they have fun with it, but you don't have to do extra writing or make it boring in order to stand up there and just say, well, this is what science fiction is. You make it engaging for them, and they love it. Another pre-writing activity, this one comes from book D, is the adjective exchange, where they have small coins on a different piece of paper and large coins on this piece of paper, and the small coins represent weak words and the big coins represent strong words, and they are exchanging weak adjectives for strong adjectives. And so that's a game, again, that you play orally, and you can do the writing for them if they really struggle with that. There's not a lot of writing involved. I mean, here they just write a word, but if that's hard for them, you can do that. So pre-writing games warm them up, teach them new skills, get them ready for writing, and then they go on to the model and teach time. This is your teaching time. This is where you read a sample story that's going to introduce the new genre. You're going to follow the scripted dialogue in your teacher's guide, and you're going to ask questions to guide the discussion and write the sentences on the board. So again, in your teacher's guide, you will have some kind of a script. There's a sample of the kind of writing you're doing, and there's a script that is, again, it's a guide for you. You don't have to do this word for word. Your kid's going to give different answers. That's why there are blank lines, because they're not going to answer the same as everybody else. So you guide them through this conversation to help them know more about how to do this new kind of writing. In this case, this was a science fiction lesson. Skill builders are something else that they'll be doing, and I've talked a little bit about the pre-writing activities, and the skill builders are teaching them to build a skill in a similar way, and you'll do those on this day. So one example of a skill builder in the book D Science Fiction is a physical activity. You draw a hopscotch grid on your patio if the weather's nice. If not, you can use painter's tape and mark one on your floor. You give them something that they can toss, like a keychain. And as they move from square to square, you are guiding them with questions. You start them with a question. Let's see if I can find it. Okay, so here's what your hopscotch. It's not your typical hopscotch grid, but it's very similar. Okay, so it tells you how to make it. And then you've got your prompts right here. So you and your instructions how to play this game. So here are some ideas for prompts. Ethan's pillow told him exciting bedtime stories. Every night the stories got longer and longer until Ethan couldn't get any sleep. That's what you start your child with. Then he or she has to add a sentence before moving on to the next hopscotch square. This is reinforcing the whole theme of this lesson to add more detail to the middle of a story. So here's a physical game, an auditory oral game, kinesthetic activity that is teaching a skill and helping them understand how to add detail to the middle of a story. The kids really don't realize they're learning, and they just want to keep playing the game, so you have to be on your guard that suddenly you realize you've been doing, it's an hour has gone by and all you've done is play games. Well, they've been learning the whole time, but you may not have an hour for that in your homeschool. So just be aware that you may need to corral them in to move on to the next activity, which is brainstorming. Each one of these ovals represents one of the activity sets on your schedule. And on the brainstorming day, you will be doing some different activities that is preparing them for writing their story. So now the journaling takes place on a worksheet, a graphic organizer that is in their student pack. So in WriteShop Junior Book D, let's see if I can, let me flip it this way, then I can find it quickly. Okay, this was one that I showed you earlier. This is a very simple one with beginning, middle, and end. Okay, it's not super involved. This is only the second lesson. And we're still teaching them the basics of using a graphic organizer because this is fairly new to them. In Book C, we have some simple graphic organizers, but you draw them on a whiteboard or on a piece of paper, and they're not creative like this. So your child fills it in as you talk, as you guide them through your teacher's guide. You'll have ways to walk them through it. Now, as they get farther along, they're going to have different kinds of graphic organizers. Sometimes they'll have a 9 grid. Sometimes they'll have a, like in this lesson, it's like a mad scientist's lab notes. And the brainstorming happens beginning, middle, and end. And this girl's mom did the brainstorming writing as her daughter, and as she and her daughter had conversation and talked about the ideas. But then when it was time to write her own rough draft, she was able to write it by herself. If your child is able to do it all independently, awesome. If not, just know that it's okay to help them with the scribing. So we have different kinds of graphic organizers also as we get into Book E, for instance. They have a graphic organizer that is unique to 5-paragraph writing. So this is the very first lesson in WriteShop Junior where we introduce them to writing 5 paragraphs. They will have a fold and go grammar folder that they'll put together that's all about 5 paragraphs. You will play some games that help them practice the idea of multiple details about something. And they're fun games. They're not writing 5 paragraphs in the pre-writing. They're just learning the concept of what it means to have 3 different things that you talk about, whether it's something physical, like I think, I'm trying to remember if it's this one, they make a backpack. They fill a backpack with 3 different things, and then they talk about each of those things as they pull them out of their backpack. And that is an example of having the backpack be the story, and each of the items inside the backpack is 1 paragraph of the story. So it's kind of like a secret analogy. Your kids don't realize that. They know more than they think and can write these multi-paragraph compositions. So lots and lots of different ways that we can use graphic organizers with our kids. Brainstorming stimulates their thinking. It helps them overcome writer's block. It helps them plan their writing. It helps them organize their thoughts. It promotes stronger vocabulary. And that is why we have all these unique graphic organizers for them to use. It'll be so much more fun and engaging, and they will feel better about their writing if they have a plan. If you just give them a blank paper, they're going to be overwhelmed. They won't know what to write, how long it should be, what direction the paper should go. And everything that you're doing is leading up to this point of doing the brainstorming to prepare them for their actual writing. Okay, so now we have the sloppy copy. It is the rough draft. This is where they just get their thoughts out. They take everything, all the elements from their brainstorming, and they should be able to get those ideas out pretty well. The one that I showed you in here was, it's actually 2 pages. I'm just showing 1 page now. But this is the science fiction story. It's marked up because of the editing that took place in the next activity set. We also have something in the books called Smaller Steps and Flying Higher. And if I can find one quickly for you. Here we go. Smaller Steps, Flying Higher. Smaller Steps is a way to relax the expectations of the writing assignment for a child who's just not quite there. So your children who are struggling a bit, like if you're teaching 2 kids together and one is having just a little bit harder time, then you do smaller steps and you don't require quite as much. If you have an older student who's working in maybe a grade down, a book down, because you want to teach your kids together, Flying Higher lets you offer a challenge to that older or more advanced child. So it is a great way, and also throughout the book we have other examples of something like these are called, these little divided boxes called Parents Say. And these are ideas that parents have given us of how they tweaked an activity. So in this case, the parent was saying, because this is the mystery lesson, the parent was saying that it was helpful to have her son listen to the audiobooks of his mystery story because he struggles with reading. So you'll find lots of tidbits all through. If you struggle to teach or your kids struggle to learn, you've got lots and lots of help and hand-holding happening in here. And again, remember, it's always okay to let your child dictate to you and you write down the answers or the sentences. Later on, they can copy them on their own paper. They can type them if they know how to do that, but it helps them to keep their ideas from escaping. Sometimes it takes a long time for the idea to get out of the head and onto paper. And if the writing glitch, the physical writing, is the thing that's stopping your kid from being able to express herself, then that's when you've got to step in and help with the writing, because you don't want to lose those opportunities to capture their beautiful oral vocabulary, their ability to articulate themselves verbally, even if they can't physically make it match. So let that be just some freedom for you to be able to do that. We also have self-editing as a part of WriteShop Junior. So self-editing is something that we begin teaching as early as kindergarten, believe it or not. And it's not the whole red pen kind of editing that we're talking about. It's just starting to become aware of our writing and looking for ways to make it better. So in WriteShop Junior, they're not ready for full-blown editing, but it's an introduction. In primary, there is no editing checklist. You do things all verbally, a little bit at a time. In junior, we introduce a generic checklist that is used in all the lessons in WriteShop Junior Book D. And it looks like, this. So it's a self-editing checklist, just with, 10 boxes or so. and they're looking for some very basic things like punctuation, capitalization, beginning, middle, and end, strong words. All right? When they get into book E and F, then we begin to add additional checklists. So there's going to be, in all three books, there will be a different poetry checklist. But in books E and F, when they get into 5-paragraph writing, they will have a completely different checklist for 5-paragraph writing than they did for the regular compositions. And here's what that one looks like. These books are great when you've got a flat table, but hard to manage to hold them up. Okay, there we go. So now you can see that their checklist is divided into 3 sections. We have content, mechanics and grammar, and self-editing. The self-editing is things like, did I use my proofreading marks to make corrections? Did I check that my story makes sense? Did I look in a thesaurus for concrete words? And so each of these sections expands their ability to use an editing checklist. Also, you are doing this together with them. They are not thrown to the lions, so to speak. They are working with you and learning the skill, because if they do it all by themselves, they're not going to know what to look like. They're going to think they know what they're looking for. They're going to think they did it well. They don't think they need to edit. But what you're doing is showing them that how they can do it, and helping them to identify things that they did well, which is really important. And one of the first things we have you guys do on the editing day is to do a job well done search and highlight a sentence that's correctly punctuated, capitalized, or whatever, just to help the child realize you're not just looking for mistakes. You want to find the things that they're doing well. Now, I talked about WriteShop 1 and 2 yesterday in a different video, but those checklists are unique to each lesson, are quite comprehensive and challenging, and every lesson has its very own specific checklist for that kind of writing. So where we've got more generic checklists in WriteShop Junior, they will have more specific ones as they move on. So the incremental nature of our program is not just within a level building skills, but also between levels, moving from younger to older. Don't get scared that you need to step back to primary if you haven't done some of these things. You don't. We will teach them if they need to know it. We begin teaching beginning, middle, and end in kindergarten. Excuse me. But we teach it differently in 3rd grade or 4th grade or whatever. So in WriteShop Junior, they still are learning beginning, middle, and end at an age-appropriate level. So there's no need to go back and try to catch up on something that you think they might have missed along the way, because they'll catch it later if they need it. Okay? So don't put them in a level that's too young. It's better to put them, remember, at their level of their thinking skills. That's where we want to focus. Okay, there are lots of other things that will happen during the self-editing. One of them is there will be some games that you can play, like where they have a baseball diamond and they have to go from home plate to first base as they look for spelling errors. Then they go to second base to look for punctuation errors, and to third base looking for capitalization, and then they come back home and now they're looking for a particular skill that was required in that lesson. So that there's a different kind of editing like that happens in each level. So it's a new layer of learning to look for details. One thing you can do is just a little bonus. If your child struggles with the editing process or feels overwhelmed or offended that you're going to make marks on their paper, or that they are expected to make marks on their paper, especially if writing is hard for them and they've poured themselves into this effort, let them use a photocopy. So just take their story, make a copy of it on your computer, on your printer, and then let them edit the copy. So much better. If you're typing it out, it's always easy to print a new copy so that they realize that they still have the original, it's unmarked, but then you've got this other one that they can write on. So you're not hurting their feelings or making them feel like, oh my gosh, this was so much work for me and now it looks a mess. That some kids have a really hard time with that, so we don't want to do that. This was the example that I was showing you from Kayla's paper. So you'll see that some of the marks that are here include proofreading symbols, because I cut this out, but this was actually in one of their fold and goes. So I cut it out because it's easy to stick in here this way, but it's part of their fold and go, teaches them editing skills, and they have proofreading symbols that they learn to use. And they don't have to use them all. They shouldn't use them all every time, but it gives them a chance to practice with them. For instance, we've got here the spelling mark and the crossing off of a word mark. So we're helping them feel grown up, and they love this. They have a set it, edit, read it bag, which is a bag full of tools that they will use for their editing. Highlighters, colored pencils, stickers, whiteout, maybe an editing hat if they're into that sort of thing, their special hat that they wear when they do their editing. They might have an editing buddy that maybe a little stuffed animal that they want to have sit with them on, for younger, like a third grader would really enjoy that, sitting on the desk or the table while they're editing. So lots of different ideas for you and for your kids to make it more engaging and more fun, less scary. And then on the final draft day, they are going to create a published, craftier kind of final draft. It's not like arts and crafts, but it would be something like this. We do a lot of things with folders because they're so versatile. This one is a science fiction story, the one we talked about earlier. But because we're focusing on beginning, middle, and end, it becomes a lap-type flap book with the beginning, middle, and end revealed as you open the flaps. Isn't that fun? Another idea in their adventure story, they take a folder. You cut this out, this tab, the center tab, to make a handle, and this becomes a suitcase because their adventure story is going to take them to some exotic place where they can have an adventure. So then they can put a picture on it or put stickers or something to decorate it, and then inside they would put their adventure story. Lots of different ideas, making a diorama, just loads of ways that they could publish their story. And we also give additional ideas in the appendix if the suggested one either isn't in your kid's wheelhouse or it just, you don't have time for that activity. There's some simpler ones that you can do in your appendix. So that is a peek at WriteShop Junior, a great, fun-filled, easy to teach, easy to use, exciting writing curriculum for your children. In the first level, Book D, the expectations are low. They don't have to know how to write a strong sentence or a paragraph. We'll teach them those things. They just jump in and do the activities. You can tone all the exercises up or down to make them easier or more challenging. As you go through the program, you're going to find 5 paragraphs introduced in books E and F toward the end of the book. Again, if you're in that level and you find your child gets to that point and is still not ready, one of the activities, the smaller steps activities says, if your child is not ready for 5 paragraphs, here's what you can do instead. And then the flying higher activities give your kids extra challenges to be able to try something new, either in the way they write, like maybe it's a 5-paragraph essay, but the challenge is to write more paragraphs. Or maybe it's the science fiction one, and it might be a science experiment that they can do, or some resources to look at to find some experiments. So lots of different ways you can do it. You'll just have lots of fun using this program with your kids. We have a placement quiz on our website, writeshop.com/placement. 30 seconds. You'll know the perfect level for your children, but you can always contact our office. You can give us a call just from the contact form on the website, and we'll be happy to help you feel equipped to teach writing to your upper elementary kids. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you soon.